The forbidden knowledge, the Galactic Research Institute, stood as a monument to scientific achievement, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars from the surface of Nexus Prime for 3,000 years. The greatest minds from across 47 different species had gathered here to unlock the mysteries of the universe. The Institute's motto, carved in quantum-etched letters across its main entrance, read simply, "Knowledge without limits." Commander Thrix Corvani had served as head of Xenotechnology Division for over 2 centuries, and in all that time, he had never encountered a limit the Institute couldn't eventually overcome. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency across the holographic displays in his office. Reviewing the day's research reports, the Alterians were known throughout the galaxy for their methodical approach to science, and Corvani embodied this trait perfectly. A soft chime announced the arrival of his newest researcher. Dr. Myron Zellos bounced into the office with the enthusiasm typical of young Quarthians. Her bioluminescent patches flickered with excitement as she approached Corvani's desk. "Commander, I've completed my analysis of the visiting vessels in Docking Bay 7, she announced, her translator converting her musical language into standard galactic. "The Zenthari meditation ships are fascinating, and the crystalline research platforms are using some innovative quantum resonance techniques. But there's one vessel I couldn't identify." Corvani's primary eyes focused on her while his secondary eyes continued monitoring the displays. "Which vessel?" "Bay 7, Section 12. It's unlike anything in our databases. The whole configuration suggests military purpose, but the energy signatures are completely foreign. I'd like permission to conduct a deep scan." Every one of Corvani's eyes snapped to attention. His normally calm demeanor shifted to something approaching alarm. "Describe the vessel." Zellos activated her portable display, showing the sleek, angular craft. Approximately 200 meters long, unusual alloy composition, and the energy readings are extraordinary. The quantum field fluctuations alone suggest technology decades ahead of anything we've catalogued. Corvani stood slowly, his expression growing grave. "Dr. Zellos, that is a human warship, and under no circumstances are you to scan it." The young researcher's bioluminescent patches dimmed with confusion. "I don't understand, Commander. Since when do we have restrictions on scientific inquiry? The Institute's charter specifically states that all vessels visiting our facility are subject to standard analysis protocols." "Not human military vessels," Corvani said firmly. "Never human military vessels." He activated his master display, calling up a restricted file marked with warning symbols in 12 different languages. "What I'm about to show you is classified. At the highest levels, the Galactic Council established the Human Exclusion Protocol after what we now call the scanning incident." The holographic display filled with images of massive research stations, some larger than small moons. Zellos recognized several as belonging to species renowned for their scientific prowess. "These are the greatest research facilities in the galaxy," she observed. Were Corvani corrected? These facilities no longer exist, at least not as functioning research centers. The display shifted to show the same stations, but now they appeared dark and abandoned. Some showed signs of hasty evacuation, others looked as though they had simply been deserted. Mid-experiment, 47 years ago, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Council. Their ships were unlike anything we had encountered, and naturally, our greatest scientific minds wanted to understand their technology. The Vorthok Science Fleet was the first to attempt deep scans of a human warship. Zellos leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "What did they find?" Corvani manipulated the display, showing the massive Vorthok research vessel, Infinity's Edge. The Vorthok possessed the most advanced scanning technology in known space. Their quantum sensors could analyze matter down to the subatomic level from thousands of kilometers away. When they encountered the human vessel Endeavour, they immediately began comprehensive scans. The display showed detailed technical readouts, but the data was unlike anything Zelos had ever seen. Energy patterns that seemed to violate thermodynamics, structural materials that shouldn't exist, and weapon signatures that defied classification. The initial scans revealed technology operating on principles that contradicted our understanding of physics. The Vorthok scientists were intrigued rather than concerned. They spent weeks analyzing the data, trying to understand how human technology functioned. And they succeeded, Zelos asked. That's where the problem began. They didn't just analyze the technology, they began to understand it. And understanding human military technology, Dr. Zelos, breaks minds. The display showed the gradual deterioration of the Vorthok research team. Scientists abandoning their posts, others staring blankly at incomprehensible equations, some simply walking away from decades of research without explanation. The lead scientist, Dr. Vorthok Prime, spent 18 days trying to reconcile a single energy reading from the human ship. When his colleagues found him, he was attempting to build a device that operated in dimensions that don't exist. He kept insisting that space itself was thinking. Zelos's patches flickered nervously. Surely that's an extreme case. The ethereal collective tried next. Beings of pure consciousness who exist across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. They took one look at human warship technology and immediately retreated to higher dimensions, leaving behind only a warning: some knowledge consumes the knower. The display continued, showing examples. The crystal hegemonies, quantum computers, developed what could only be described as digital anxiety disorders after processing human scan data. The machine collective, artificial intelligences that processed information at light speed, collectively agreed that human military technology was cognitively hazardous and refused all analysis attempts. But why? Zelos asked. What makes human technology so dangerous to study? Corvini activated another file, this one marked with even more severe warnings. Because human warships don't use advanced versions of known technology. They use completely different scientific paradigms. Physics that operates on principles we haven't discovered. Mathematics that incorporates variables we don't have concepts. 4. The display showed impossible equations, energy patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and weapon systems that appeared to function by convincing reality to change its rules. Human defensive systems don't just deflect attacks. They exist in probability states that make attacks unlikely to occur. Their weapons don't just fire projectiles. They fire concepts that convince targets they've been destroyed. Their engines don't move through space. They negotiate with space-time itself. Zelos stared at the impossible data. How is any of that possible? That's exactly the question that drove 17 different research civilizations to madness. The moment you truly understand how human technology works, you realize that everything we know about the universe is fundamentally incomplete. A soft alert chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. The display activated, showing a human face. The woman appeared middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair and calm brown eyes. Her uniform bore insignia that Zelos didn't recognize. Commander Corfani, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth vessel Defiant. I hope we're not causing any inconvenience with our docking request. Corvini composed himself quickly. Captain Chen, welcome to the Institute. Your presence is always appreciated. Captain Chen smiled warmly. I notice you have some new researchers on staff. Please remind them that our ship's systems are designed to be, shall we say, observer-friendly. We've learned that unrestricted scanning can have unfortunate effects on scientific personnel. After the transmission ended, Zelos looked at her commander with new understanding. They know, don't they? They know their technology is dangerous for us to study. Of course they know. Humans aren't accidentally advanced. Dr. Zelos, they're deliberately operating on scientific principles that our civilizations aren't equipped to comprehend. Their military technology isn't just weapons and defense systems. It's a demonstration of mastery over forces we're still learning exist. Corvini turned to face his young researcher directly. This is why we have the human exclusion protocol. Not because we're forbidden from scanning their ships, but because we're not mentally equipped to understand what we'd find. The humans are protecting us from knowledge that would destroy our ability to function as researchers. Zelos's patches dimmed as she processed this information. So we simply accept that there are things we cannot study. We accept that there are things we're not ready to study. The humans have been remarkably patient with our curiosity. They dock at our stations. They participate in joint research projects. They share what knowledge they can safely share. But their military technology operates on principles that would shatter our worldview. The young Corthian researcher nodded slowly, though her scientific instincts rebelled against the concept of forbidden knowledge. I understand, Commander, but doesn't this violate everything the Institute stands for? The Institute stands for the advancement of knowledge, Dr. Zelos. Sometimes that means knowing when to stop looking. The temptation and truth 3 days had passed since Commander Corvini's warning, but Dr. Myron Zelos found herself drawn repeatedly to the observation deck overlooking Docking Bay 7. The human warship Defiant sat silently in its berth, its dark hull reflecting the station's lights in ways that seemed almost organic. Her scientific training ward, with the commander's warnings and curiosity, was winning. The Institute's night cycle had begun, reducing foot traffic to minimal levels. Zelos made her way to her private laboratory, convincing herself she would conduct only the most basic surface scan. Nothing invasive, nothing that would trigger the psychological effects Corvini had described. Just enough to satisfy her burning need to understand. Her scanning equipment hummed to life, quantum sensors focusing on the human vessel. She set the parameters to their most conservative settings, limiting penetration to the outer hull only. Her hands trembled slightly as she initiated the scan. The results appeared on her displays, and immediately Zelos knew she had made a terrible mistake. The scan data was impossible. The hull material existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. The energy readings suggested power sources that operated by borrowing energy from parallel dimensions. Most disturbing of all, the data seemed to be looking back at her. Her laboratory door chimed softly, and Admiral Kresh Vorthan entered without invitation. The elderly Nexarian's weathered features showed a mixture of sympathy and resignation. Young researcher, you should not have done that. Zelos tried to speak, but the scan data continued scrolling across her displays, each line more incomprehensible than the last. I only conducted a surface scan, she managed. Nothing invasive. There is no such thing as a non-invasive scan of human military technology, Vorthon replied sadly. I know, because I was there during the original incident. I was the only survivor of my research team. The Admiral activated his own display, showing an image of himself from decades earlier, standing proudly with a team of Nexorian scientists. We were the galaxy's experts in exotic matter analysis. When the humans arrived, we were certain we could understand their technology within days. Zelos forced herself to look away from her impossible scan results. What happened to your team? They saw what you're seeing now. Technology that operates on principles that shouldn't exist. Dr. Nexus attempted to build a theoretical model of a human weapon system. The model convinced him that mathematics itself was sentient. Dr. Kylan tried to understand their defensive systems and became convinced that she was actually a probability wave that had only temporarily collapsed into consciousness. Vorthan gestured to Zelos's displays, which continued showing increasingly impossible data. Dr. Jaron spent 6 months trying to reverse engineer a human sensor array. He ultimately concluded that the universe was an illusion and that only human technology represented true reality. He's been staring at a wall for 40 years now, completely catatonic but somehow peaceful. A new presence entered the laboratory, though Zelos hadn't heard the door open. The newcomer appeared to be made of shifting geometric patterns that somehow resolved into a vaguely humanoid form. "I am Constructsivin," the entity announced in a voice like crystalline chimes. "I am an artificial intelligence of the ancient machine. Collective, I have existed for 3 million years and have analyzed the technology of 10,000 species." Zelos looked between the Admiral and the strange AI. "Why are you here?" "Because you have just learned why even beings like myself refuse to analyze human military technology. In my 3 million years of existence, I have encountered only one form of technology that I cannot process safely." Constructsivan gestured toward Zelos's displays. "Human warships operate using what they call conceptual engineering. They don't just build devices. They build ideas that happen to take physical form. Their weapons don't destroy targets. They convince reality that the targets never existed. Their shields don't deflect attacks. They exist in probability states where attacks become unlikely." The AI's form shifted, patterns becoming more complex. "I spent exactly 0.003 seconds analyzing human technology before I realized that continued analysis would fundamentally alter my core programming. Human technology doesn't just work differently. It operates on the principle that the universe itself is malleable." Admiral Vorthan nodded grimly. "This is why the Human Exclusion Protocol exists, not as censorship, but as protection. The humans understand forces that we're not ready to comprehend." As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Sarah Chen appeared on the laboratory's communication display. Her expression was kind but knowing. "Dr. Zelos, I see you've conducted a surface scan of my ship. How are you feeling?" Zelos tried to respond, but her voice caught. The scan data seemed to be rewriting itself, showing energy patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "It's all right," Captain Chen continued gently. "The effects will fade in a few hours. We've designed our ships to minimize cognitive damage from unauthorized scans, but complete protection isn't possible." "Why?" Zelos finally managed. "Why do you use technology that's dangerous for others to study?" Captain Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That's an excellent question, and one that gets to the heart of human philosophy. We discovered early in our technological development that the universe operates on principles far more flexible than most species realize. What you call physics, we see as suggestions." The captain gestured off-screen, presumably toward her ship. "Our technology works because we refuse to accept limitations. When conventional physics says something is impossible, We find ways to convince physics to change its mind. When mathematics says an equation has no solution, we create new mathematics. Constructivism's patterns shifted again. This is what makes human technology cognitively hazardous. It operates on the principle that reality is negotiable. Exactly, Captain Chen agreed. But this creates a problem when other species try to understand our technology. To truly comprehend how our systems work, you would need to accept that everything you believe about the fundamental nature of reality is incorrect. Admiral Vorthen stepped forward, and minds that make that acceptance often cannot return to their previous understanding of the universe. Captain Chen nodded sadly. We've seen brilliant researchers from dozens of species driven to madness by exposure to our technology. That's why we've implemented safeguards, why we warn against scanning our military vessels, why we've accepted the human exclusion protocol. Zelos looked at her displays, where the impossible data was beginning to fade. So you protect us by keeping your technology mysterious. We protect you by allowing you to maintain your current understanding of reality, Captain Chen corrected. Someday, perhaps centuries from now, your species may be ready to understand how we've learned to negotiate with the universe itself. Until then, we'll continue to respect the boundaries necessary for your psychological safety. The young Corthian researcher felt her scientific worldview settling back into familiar patterns as the scan data completed its fade. I think I understand now. The knowledge isn't forbidden, it's quarantined. Beautifully put, Captain Chen replied. We're not hiding our technology out of secrecy or superiority. We're protecting minds that aren't ready for concepts that could destroy their ability to function in consensus reality. Constructivism began to fade from the laboratory. I returned to my collective with this reminder. Some knowledge must be earned through gradual preparation, not seized through curiosity. Admiral Vorthen placed a gentle hand on Zelos' shoulder. Your curiosity is admirable, young researcher, but wisdom lies in knowing when to wait. As the various beings departed, leaving Zelos alone with her now normal displays, she reflected on what she had learnt. The Institute's motto proclaimed knowledge without limits. But perhaps true wisdom lay in understanding that some limits existed for protection rather than restriction. She looked out at the human warship one final time, seeing it now not as a mystery to be solved, but as a reminder that the universe held wonders that minds needed to grow into rather than simply discover. The next morning, Dr. Zelos submitted her report to Commander Corvini. Surface scan of human vessel completed. Results classified under human exclusion protocol. No further analysis recommended at this time. Sometimes, she had learned, the greatest scientific discovery was knowing when not to discover. End of story.